The Bible contains hundreds of prophecies related to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the end of this age. They are scattered throughout the Old and New Testament like individual pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle. If you don't know what the big picture looks like, it is very hard to fit the individual pieces together and solve the puzzle. This video will provide an overview of key end-time events to help you understand the big picture. We won't spend time providing an exhaustive proof for each of these main points, but we will cover the key Bible passages associated with these events. There are additional prophecy videos on this channel if you want to explore this topic more deeply. The best place to begin our study of Bible prophecy is with Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. Thousands of years ago, God revealed the overall architecture or structure of his plan for end-time events in Daniel chapter 9, beginning in verse 24. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. In this particular passage, God reveals to Daniel that 70 weeks or 70 heptads have been decreed as part of his overall plan of salvation for humanity. This is not talking about 70 literal weeks, but rather 70 heptads or cycles of 7 years. So it is 70 sevens of years. This means that a lengthy period of time would begin to be counted from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the conclusion of God's plan. As we see in verse 25, there is a prediction that Messiah, the Prince, would come after a period of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. This is a reference to the fact that there were 2 decrees issued to move forward and rebuild Jerusalem. There was a short period of time where the Jewish people were commanded to stop their work of rebuilding. Thus, there is 7 weeks followed by 62 weeks. This prophecy covered a period of time that ended shortly before the birth of Jesus Christ. Continuing on now with the prophecy about the Messiah in Daniel chapter 9 verse 26. Then after 62 weeks the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. In this prophecy we see that after the 62-week period was concluded, the Messiah would be cut off. This was fulfilled by Jesus Christ in 30 A.D. when he was crucified, buried, and then resurrected. The second part of this prophecy says that the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. This was fulfilled in 70 A.D. when the Roman army came, led by Vespasian and Titus, and destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the sanctuary. As the prophecy predicted, there were desolations and destructions upon Jerusalem and the land of Israel until the modern era when the Jewish state of Israel was reestablished in 1948. This prophecy says in verse 27 that this Prince who was to come would make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, that is, 1 heptad or 1 7-year period. In the middle of this week, that is, after about 3.5 years, this prince would put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. This is the ushering in of what is commonly called the abomination of desolations, as we will read about shortly. Thus, in this prophecy, we see clearly that God had predicted the coming of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, and the restoration of that temple in the latter days. The next prophecy that we need to examine is found in Daniel chapter 7, where God predicted the coming of 4 world-ruling empires. The 4th empire listed here in Daniel chapter 7 represents the Roman Empire, which was destined to rule all of the world at the time of the end. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 23, we read, "Thus he said, The 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and tread it down, and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High, and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." In this passage we see the coming of the Roman Empire, which did indeed rule the earth for 1,000 years, and it fell, but it will be reborn in the last days. The first phase of this rebirth of the Roman Empire will occur when 10 leaders will come forward, leading 10 nations or groups of nations to restore and revive this ancient Roman system. After these 10 kings have been established, another king, an 11th king, will arise. This 11th king is commonly referred to as the Antichrist, or in the book of Revelation, he is called the Beast. This king that comes after the 10 is the one who will rule the world for a period of 3.5 years, described here in Daniel as a time, times, and half a time, which refers to a year, 2 years, and half a year. This Antichrist, or beast, will wear down the saints of the Highest One. That is, he will persecute God's people, and there will be a period of great martyrdom. He will also seek to make alterations in God's laws and in God's festival seasons. So to summarize what we've learned so far, there will come a time in the future when the Roman Empire will be revived and resurrected. It will be led by 10 kings ruling over 10 nations or groups of nations. At some point, a great political leader who is part of this new revived Roman Empire will establish a covenant or a treaty of some kind. This treaty will be 7 years in length. 3.5 years after this covenant is enacted, this great political leader will overthrow the 10 kings and take over sole rulership of this revived Roman Empire. He will then rule for a period of 3.5 years, or 42 months. Now we need to look at 3 key prophecies in the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 5, we see, "The beast was given a mouth to speak arrogant and blasphemous words, and authority to act for 42 months. This period of 42 months matches the time period we saw earlier in Daniel chapter 7 and was referred to as a time, times, and half a time, or 3.5 years, here listed as 42 months. This time period also corresponds to 1,260 days. So in Revelation chapter 13, verse 5, we see that this beast or Antichrist will have power to rule over the nations, to lead this revived Roman Empire, and to persecute God's people for a period of 42 months or 3.5 years. In Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, we read, "And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." In this passage, God is revealing to the Apostle John that 2 prophets of God will stand up and testify of God's truth to the world during this great tribulation period of 1,260 days, which corresponds to the 42 months that the beast will be ruling over the earth. The third great event that happens during this great tribulation period of 3.5 years is found in Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where God had prepared a place to care for her for 1,260 days. In this particular prophecy, in Revelation chapter 12, the church is pictured as a celestial woman. In symbol, she flees to a wilderness to hide from the persecution of the dragon and his agent on earth, the beast. Jesus Christ spoke about this period of time when the church would flee from the persecution of Satan and his agent on earth, the beast. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, we read, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things out that are in his house. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak." Continuing on in Matthew chapter 24, verse 19, "But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. But pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will." So here in this prophecy of Matthew chapter 24, Jesus told the disciples that those who believe in him should flee to the mountains for protection when they see the abomination of desolation established in the holy place, that is, in the temple which is to be rebuilt in the end time. There will be great tribulation on the earth, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until now. This great tribulation period corresponds to the 42 months or the 1,260 days that we have already been studying. The Apostle Paul gives us more detail about this abomination of desolation and the coming of the Antichrist in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Here the Apostle Paul prophesied, "Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure, nor be disturbed either by a spirit or a messenger or a letter as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come." Continuing on in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God." So in these two prophecies of Matthew chapter 24 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, we see clearly that the beginning of the Great Tribulation period will be ushered in by a spectacular event. The man of sin, the Antichrist, will enter the Holy of Holies and desecrate the temple. He will declare himself to be God and seek to be worshipped by men. This will usher in the period of 42 months, 1,260 days, called the Great Tribulation. So at this point we now understand that there is coming a 7-year period, which will begin with the establishment of a 7-year covenant or treaty of some kind. In the middle of the 7-year period, the beast or the Antichrist will overthrow the 10 rulers who are ruling over this revived Roman Empire. He will take sole possession of this Roman Empire and begin to persecute God's people. He will enter into the holy temple that is to be rebuilt in Jerusalem and defile it with his presence. He will seek to be worshipped by men, and he will usher in a period of 42 months, or 1,260 days, of persecution against God's people and warfare. In addition to the 1,260 days, the Bible mentions 2 other time periods connected with Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy that we also need to understand. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 11, we read, "And from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days." So to summarize what we've learned thus far, the pre-tribulation period will begin when 10 kings arise in Europe and restore the Roman Empire. A great political leader within this system, who is the beast or the Antichrist, will make a 7-year covenant with many people. That 7-year covenant will start the 7-year countdown for Daniel's 70th week. After approximately 3.5 years, this beast or Antichrist will overthrow the 10 kings and take over sole rulership of this revived Roman Empire. This will begin the Great Tribulation, which will last for 1,260 days. As the book of Revelation makes clear, this is when the first 7 seals of the book of Revelation are opened, and 6 of the 7 trumpet plagues are poured out on the world and humanity. It will be a period of war, famine, plague, pestilence, and martyrdom. Between the end of the 1,260 days and the 1,290 days, there will be an additional 30-day period. This is the time when the 7th trumpet sounds, the first resurrection occurs, Jesus Christ returns, and the 7 last plagues of God are poured out on the world. This period of time culminates with the Battle of Armageddon. Between the end of the 1,290 days and the 1,335 days, there is an additional period of 45 days, during which the city of Jerusalem will be cleansed from all of the death and destruction that has occurred, the temple will be sanctified, the marriage of the bride and the Lamb will occur, and the millennium will begin. If you're interested in learning more about end-time prophecy and the second coming of Jesus Christ, be sure to check out our playlist on the Book of Revelation, also on this channel.